I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mish Shedlock, editor of Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis. Welcome to the show, Mish.
Hey, pleasure to be back on.
It looks like the fencing business is the business to be in today. Trump wants to build a giant fence between the U.S. and Mexico, have the Mexicans pay for it. And now in Europe, it's fence mania as one country after another decides it's going to fence out the migrants and try to, herd them to Germany or Sweden?
Well, no. Actually, Slovenia is building one, Austria is building one so that the migrants don't go from Slovenia to Austria, because Germany's bitching that the people are moving from Austria to Germany, and now Italy is, of course, concerned that with the fence on the border between Slovenia and Austria, well, where are the migrants going to go? They're going to head the other direction and go into Italy, and Italy's not prepared to handle them. The one place where there ought to damn be a fence, there isn't one, which is between Greece and Turkey, which is how millions of these migrants have all entered the EU at one choke point right in Germany. So right in Turkey. So the one place where a fence would be useful, there is no fence.
Well, Slovenia is now using their army to help control the migration, and they want help from NATO. Help like what? Bombers?
They want help from the EU, not NATO. But the EU offered 400 troops, 400 police, to help stop this, incoming flow of migrants. But I did the math on that, and the number of people moving into Slovenia is actually amazing. It's like 4.5% of the population. It would be as if 13 million people or something, all flooded into the United States, let's say in Houston, San Diego, and Florida, all in 10 days' time. What would happen in Canada if a similar number started flowing into Toronto? What are you going to do? It's crazy.
I guess Canada and the U.S. are kind of lucky to have a giant lake between us and Europe and Africa where all the migration is coming from.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Here, I did the math on the population. They had 84,000 people flow into the country in 10 days, and the population is only 2 million. That is a population growth of 4.2%. Here's the exact math. That would be the equivalent in the U.S. if 13,393,000 people flooded in the same 10-day. There would be panic. And what is the EU doing about this? Well, nothing. They've not done the right things. I proposed, I had a 5-point strategy. Block the border between Greece and Turkey, stabilize Syria, but also seek promises from Assad of free Syrian elections, eliminate the free handouts. That's why they're all going to Germany. They're going through Slovenia, not because they want to go to Slovenia, but because they want to get to Germany and Sweden, because Germany and Sweden have the biggest handouts. So you need to greatly reduce the free handouts. You need to return economic refugees to the point of entry. And given U.S. and U.K. essentially created ISIS, and the U.S. is backing the Al-Qaeda rebels trying to tear down Assad in Syria, the U.S. and the U.K. created this damn mess, and so perhaps we need to give Turkey some aid for the U.S. and UK rolling this mess. What have they done? They've not done any of this. Instead, they're building fences in the wrong places. The U.S. is still backing the Al-Qaeda rebels trying to overthrow Assad, and the people want out of Syria, and they're going where the handouts are big. What did Germany do? This one's interesting too. Germany thought that they could stop the flow of migrants by just simply stopping giving them cash. So Germany was actually giving these people cash. But instead they said, well, we're just going to give you vouchers for food and shelter instead. Well, when you have no food and no shelter, what are you going to use your cash for? You're going to use it to buy food and shelter. So by giving them vouchers instead of food and shelter, instead of vouchers instead of money, it's not going to do a thing, because they were going to spend all of their money on food and shelter. Now they're going to spend their vouchers on food and shelter.
Well, Mish, I was going to say in the U.S. you could buy a car or drugs or a machine gun with food stamps, so why would vouchers work in Germany?
Then where would you live? I suppose you could live in your car, but I don't think they would be giving you enough money monthly to, buy that car. So they're going to use that, and if you spend it all on a car, you wouldn't have any money to eat. Of course, you might decide to steal your food instead. So yeah, there is a benefit here to money over vouchers, but it's not great enough to want to keep these people from flooding into your country.
We've all seen the aerial shots of the long lineups of migrants who have marched literally hundreds and hundreds of miles. Is there a good chance that some of those people will actually freeze to death over the winter?
We'll see what happens. I suspect they'll do something, but what it is, I don't know. But this is all costing someone money here. They're going to either have to, move them back to Turkey, and what is Turkey going to do with them? And the agreement that Merkel worked out with Turkey was inane. One of Turkey's demands for stopping the migrants from moving on into Greece was 3 billion euros. But in their second demand was, free access for Turkey, so that the Turks wouldn't have to use their passports to get into, go into European EU countries. That's another 75 million people who would now have unrestricted access to the EU. Absolutely crazy. Fortunately for Merkel, Turkey decided that 3 billion euros wasn't enough, demanded more money, and the agreement collapsed. Craziness.
Well, as you said, you did the number crunching. It would be like 13 million people moving into the U.S. instantly. That would be 1.3 million people in Canada. In other words, the population of Calgary or Edmonton.
Yes. Let's move here. Let's move the entire population of Edmonton to Toronto and see what happens. I believe there would be panic.
Although with the oil patch situation right now, maybe the population of Edmonton will move to Toronto, but not all at once.
Yes, not in 10 days. Not in 10 days.
In U.S. politics, we have Ben Carson now doing better than Donald Trump in the polls. Bernie Sanders neck and neck with Hillary, in some places surpassing her. Could you have imagined a year ago that two black men could be vying it out for president?
Not really, but I don't think Carson's going to last. I could be wrong. All the people who said that Trump wouldn't last, I think those people are wrong. I think Jeb Bush is indeed out of it now, and I don't think Mario Rubio is going to come to the rescue. So we'll see. Now, the Bernie Sanders-Hillary thing is interesting, because if you ask the people who won those debates, it was like overwhelming percentage of people said that Sanders won the debate. But it was trumped up in the media that Hillary Clinton won the debates. What polls were they reading? clearly the media, for whatever reason, loves Hillary and is promoting her. The media likes to report on, for different reasons. They like the controversy between, Trump and Jeb Bush, so they're playing that up. So it's all very curious. I don't think Carson can do it, and I'm telling you, for the Republicans personally, I'm not going to get my pick, which would have been Rand Paul. My second choice, without a doubt, is Trump. I would rather have him than any of the other warmongers.
Is Trump in touch with the people? And I just go back to his recent statement. I started off tough. I grew up in Brooklyn, which sounds tough. And, I got a small $1 million loan from my dad. What person in the world would call it a small loan? Except Trump.
I got a small $1 million loan from my dad. Well, my dad died about 10 years ago. He lived in Danville, Illinois, a place where the housing bubble just completely passed by. Danville was oblivious to the boom and the bust both. We sold his house about 10 years ago for $14,000. So I grew up in a very tiny home, but there were 6 of us, and I never was even on a plane until I was 21. So the idea of $1 million being a small amount of money just kind of doesn't ring very well with me.
Well, most of us, if we got $1 million, we'd go home and retire. I mean, really, the interest, the income from your $1 million would give you $50,000-$60,000 a year. Couldn't you be comfortable on that?
Well, interest in a bank would get you nothing, but I suppose if you bought 30-year treasuries, you could get something close to 3%. And it depends on where you want to live. That would be enough. Of course, if you invested in tax-free munis in stable states, you could maybe add another % to that. So, could one could get by probably if one was frugal enough. But interest rates aren't high enough that $1 million right now would do it. You'd probably still need a part-time job. But how bad is that, hey?
Right, exactly. Work 3 days a week and know that, you still have money in the bank. You're saying that Sanders has a chance. Now, one of the things that Bernie has suggested is that the U.S. adopt the same kind of public health care countries like Canada, Britain, Germany, France. In fact, the entire industrialized world has.
Well, you know what? Wasn't that sort of what Obamacare was supposed to do? I guess not. One of the things, Sanders is a socialist here. And, he points to this model in Europe and say, look, it works over there. Well, okay, it works over there because tax rates are enormous, because there's caps on doctor salaries, because of, all kinds of other differences. I mean, it only works because of those things. So unless we're willing to have caps on doctor salaries, provide free education, do all this stuff, we can turn the United States into Sweden, sort of, but is that really what we want to do? And if it works for a tiny country like Sweden, does that really mean that the model is going to work for a much larger country like the U.S.? I don't think so, for numerous reasons. I'm not a socialist. I believe in free market capitalism, and it is capitalism and free market capitalism, not socialism, that is responsible for increasing longevity of lifestyles. It is responsible for increasing standards of living. What has socialism ever contributed to any of those things? And the answer is nothing. Socialism is the idea that we're going to take money from some people and redistribute it where it needs to go but who gets to decide how it gets redistributed and where? And that is the ultimate reason why socialism fails, because people who are responsible for redistributing the money and sloshing it around can never allocate that money as good as a free market economy can do.
Communist China is about to allow couples to have 2 children instead of just 1. Why are they doing that?
Well, their population is getting old. They're looking at Japan and seeing the problems that the demographic problems that Japan has. So they've decided to reverse course. But, what are they going to do with all the people? So there's a downside to all of this, and one can debate whether or not there should be such restrictions. But look at the problems in countries where the population growth is going up rapidly. A lot of Mideast, Africa, poor countries. It's causing a lot of social economic problems, and with the technological advances, and we're losing jobs to technology. Do you really want to be bringing on people when one has to ask the question, what jobs are going to be there for those people? So whether they should be controlling these things, one needs to at least look at the question logically, what are we going to do with all these people?
Well, with China, they've built 100 or so cities of 600,000 that will accommodate 600,000 people that have nobody in them, and this year alone,
but how these people with no jobs going to afford to be able to buy those homes where these homes were supposedly for?
And another amazing figure from China: this year alone, they will have built 4,000 giant shopping malls.
Lovely, just what we need. And I did a report on that. The malls in China are closing, failing at an amazing rate. There's not enough people buying anything in these malls. A dress shop owner said sold one dress all week. The vacancy rates are high and soaring. So this is what happens when you have a lot of people with no money, and and cities where no one lives. So you got a mall in a city where there is no one, then there's no traffic. So none of this makes any economic sense, yet it all adds to GDP. You build a house where no one lives, that adds to GDP. You give away free food and services. Government spending by definition adds to GDP. You build a road that goes to nowhere that no one uses, that adds to GDP. So we've got these GDP reports in China that say GDP is growing close to 7%. Well, it is, sort of, but not if one subtracts out the malinvestments of all the money that just used to pad bureaucrats' profits, and you have idle resources.
We'll have more with Mish Shedlock right after the break.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on The Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mish Shedlock. Is it really true the state of Illinois is in such bad shape that the city of Chicago is putting a tax on sheep? I didn't know they had a lot of sheep.
Well, Not quite. Well, actually, yes. There is a tax on sheep, but by sheep I mean all the citizens of the city of Chicago. And it was as if we rounded up all the ants and all the anteaters, and of course there's millions of ants and probably a dozen or so anteaters, and we say we're going to let you all vote on what's for dinner. And and they tally the votes, and they said, you know what? We're going to throw out all the votes of the ants, and the anteaters get to decide what's for dinner. And that's exactly what happened. These aldermen passed the highest property tax rate in the history of Chicago, and one of the reasons is their own pensions are in trouble, and Chicago aldermen have extremely generous pension benefits for part-time work, mind you, and they're collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for a part-time job. So what? There's 20 aldermen or something. I forget the number here. So these 20 anteaters vote to, raise taxes on the ants, which is the people of Chicago, to support their own pensions. That's exactly what happened. And Mayor Rahm Emanuel, who I called the shepherd in this article, is the one who proclaimed, well, we're better off now that we've done this. And so I said, well, who's better off? Is it the anteaters or the ants?
Well, if they're upping taxes in Chicago, I mean, unlike Canada that only has 7 or 8 really big cities, in the U.S. you have 200 large cities to choose to live in. Mm-hmm. Isn't Chicago just doing its best to chase people away?
Yes, it is. And Chicago is losing population to, I believe, every state in the union, or maybe it's 48 states in the union. Chicago is losing population to Alaska, for Christ's sake. And so, yeah, people have an incentive to get out. The people who are coming here are the ones that look at Illinois benefits that are, this is similar to what's going on in Europe, but not quite to the same degree. People coming to Illinois are those that, don't make a lot of money, but whose benefits in Illinois are, say, more attractive than those who live in Indiana. Illinois, Chicago gives more benefits, more free housing, more of the kinds of things that attracts exactly the wrong people. The wealthy are fleeing the state. There's no question about it. And hiking property taxes in the city of Chicago, raising the tax rate for the state of Illinois will do exactly the same thing, chase people away.
Isn't that something that politicians forget? The very rich, who they want to tax the hell out of, well, if you do that, they just move. There's lots of places in the world where they won't have to pay any tax.
Do they forget, or do they just not give a damn? This goes back to the anteater and ant theory. As long as there's enough ants that are going to stay and pay the price, then the anteaters will do well. So that's what these guys did. I called it the sheepdogs and the sheep. It can be anteaters and ants. It can be however you want it. But what we're talking about is the financial repression of the select few in favor of themselves over everyone else. That's what's going on here. And what are they going to do? If they don't raise taxes, their pensions are insolvent. So even though in the long run raising taxes is the wrong thing to do for those in control who depend on their pensions being solvent for as long as they're alive, they're going to raise taxes. In a nutshell, that explains it.
Is it true in Illinois now, if I win more than $600 in the lottery, instead of a beautiful blonde handing me a giant check that says $3 million payable to Jim, instead they get an IOU?
Yeah, they do get an IOU. There's lots of IOUs here in the state, and the state has even stopped paying into state pensions because there is no budget in Illinois, and until there's a balanced budget in Illinois, well, what they claim to be a balanced budget, there will never be a balanced budget here in this state.
If you get nothing but an IOU, why are people still...
an IOU, yes.
I was going to say, why are people...
There are lawsuits against the state now for that, but, people know this in advance. If you're going to enter the lottery, if you win, you're going to get an IOU.
But they're still buying the tickets.
They're still buying the tickets. That's what the ants and the sheep do.
Bitcoin, there's a differing point of view here. The European Union has just ruled Bitcoin is a currency. The U.S. government considers Bitcoin a commodity. What is it?
It's both. It's both. If money is a commodity whose primary purpose is a medium of exchange. And so what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a commodity whose a currency whose primary role, its only role actually, I don't know, not only, the people speculate in this like they speculate in other currencies, but its primary purpose is used to buy things. So from that aspect, it's both a commodity and a currency, although it's kind of interesting that they label it a commodity here and a currency over in Europe. Technically, it's both, but currency is a more defined meaning, such as granite is a rock and a rock is a rock, but not all rock is granite, but all granite is a rock. That's the kind of analogy here that we're talking about. And so when the Commodities Exchange here ruled that Bitcoin was a commodity, they're accurate. But if they say it's a commodity and not a currency, then I believe they're wrong, because I believe it's both.
Well, I know the rules for crossing the border with, say, $10,000 worth of coal and $10,000 in cash are totally different, and the penalties if you're caught doing one or the other are totally different as well.
Oh, that's true. That's true. And then, again, that's all part of the definition. Currency is just simply more specific than the word commodity. All currencies are commodities. Not all commodities are currencies.
Right, because I'm sure if you go across the border with diamonds or gold, they're going to consider those to be currency-like.
Well, they'll consider anything to be whatever the hell they want so that they can confiscate it.
Well, yeah, government's not happy until everybody's in jail and they've got all your wealth. Well, at least the Harper government was going that way.
Certainly the latter is true.
Mike, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
Oh, pleasure to be on.
My guest has been Mike Mish Shedlock, editor of Mish's Global Economic Trend Analysis. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments about the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.